Water is life. Sourcing clean water and using water wisely are key elements of sustainable living. The Earth systems that purify and distribute water are a marvel of nature's engineering. It takes roughly 100 times more energy than the global economy uses to operate these natural water purification systems. They are 100% solar powered, and they provide service free of charge. They're self-regulating, self-organizing, and have operated over billions of years without human oversight. We are interconnected to all the waters of the earth by these systems. The cup of tea you drink almost certainly has molecules that were once in Cleopatra's bathwater. The waters of the planet have cycled through this system countless times. Some of the molecules of water that flow in your blood once flowed in the mighty rivers of the earth. The Mississippi, the Ganges, the Nile, the Amazon, the Rhone. The hydrological cycle shows that the interconnectedness of humans and natural systems across time and space is not only a philosophical concept, it's a physical and biological reality. Collecting and using rainwater, fresh from the sky, celebrates nature's abundance and connectedness. In this lecture, I'll discuss how you can look to nature for inspiration in the design of systems that provide water for drinking, washing, irrigation, and other human uses. We'll also look at ecological approaches to handling stormwater. As we did with energy, we'll look at smart ways to get the same or better services from less water, and then look at sustainable ways to supply this lower demand. The hydrological cycle is powered by a daily input of solar energy, and as I said earlier, uses hundreds of times the energy flow that the human economy uses. It's got entropic elements, where water is distributed across the globe, collects various impurities, and loses some of its usefulness. It's got anti-entropic elements, powered by sunlight, where water is collected and impurities are removed. It's a core ecosystem service of what I call the economy of nature. If nature provides the hydrological cycle, why should we be concerned about sustainability in water? Well, water is a renewable resource, but that doesn't mean that its availability is unlimited. In a given period, precipitation is always limited to a certain amount. The same holds true for the amount of water that recharges groundwater reserves and that flows through a river. Rainwater can be used for agricultural purposes, and water in rivers and aquifers can be used for irrigation, industry, or domestic purposes. But in the long term, we can't take more water from lakes and groundwater reservoirs than the rate at which they recharge. A river can be emptied. We take so much water from the Colorado River that it no longer flows to the sea. We've also got to leave water for the rest of nature. Rainwater not used for agricultural production is left to sustain natural vegetation. The ground and surface water flows not used for human purposes or polluted are available to sustain healthy aquatic ecosystems. Now, domestic water use is only about 8.5% of the total water use. So there is really only so much that you can do at home to directly affect overall water use. But two of the largest US water uses, power generation, that is, the need of large utility power plants to be cooled by fresh water, and irrigation can be affected at home by generating or buying green power and by growing your own food or buying it locally. When you think about water usage, you need to understand that many products have embodied water, which is the amount of water it takes to produce the product. One tool for making embodied water visible is water footprinting. The water footprint of an individual, community, or business is defined as the total volume of fresh water that is used to produce the goods and services consumed by the individual or community or produced by the business. Let's look at embodied water in food. On average, it takes about 1,850 gallons of water to produce 1 pound of beef. But producing 1 pound of soy burger takes only about 295 gallons of water. In general, vegetable sources of protein take much less water than animal sources like beef. And it takes about 1,000 gallons of water to make 1 gallon of milk, which you might find quite surprising. Energy has embodied water, but water also has embodied energy. Energy and water are inextricably linked. Because water is heavy and must move through many process steps before it reaches your tap, public water supply and treatment is energy intensive. Water needs to be pumped from the source to the treatment facility, where energy is used to treat the water. Further energy is used to pump the water from the treatment facility to the customer. The energy intensity of water ranges from about 0.25 to about 3.5 kilowatt hours per 1,000 gallons. Even small community water systems can process billions of gallons of water per year, and this means a lot of energy. Energy is typically the largest cost for public water supply companies. Once in customers' homes, there is more energy used in order to heat water for showers, washing, and cooking. Finally, we use energy to treat and discharge wastewater. In many places, nature provides water for free. The cost of water is related to pumping, purifying, and distributing it. So if you collect and use rainwater, you bypass all that. Here's how water is used in a typical U.S. household. The water use per person is about 80 to 100 gallons per person per day. 70% is used indoors, 30% is used outdoors. There are 4 major considerations for sustainable water use in a typical household. The first is using water efficiently. The next is how we source the water. Third is treating polluted waters. And finally, stormwater management. Let's look at each of these in a little more detail. First, let's look at using water efficiently. As we discussed earlier, using water efficiently saves water and energy. There are a wide variety of technologies that allow you to get the same or better service with less water, like low-flow shower heads and water-conserving toilets. Horizontal axis washing machines, typically side-loading, use half the energy and 1/3 less water than a typical vertical access washing machine, and they also get your clothes cleaner. Here's an example of how we can save resources and have a better service at the same time. So roughly 27% of water used in households is used to flush the toilet, the largest single use. I find it a little ironic that we use a lot of energy and material resources to create fresh water that is ultimately flushed down the toilet. Composting toilets offer an alternative that uses little or no water and recycles waste into a resource, fertilizer for plants. For this reason, composting toilets have a lot of advocates in the sustainability community. Composting toilets can be as simple as the Jenks Humanure system, which uses a 5-gallon bucket with a toilet seat, sawdust, and an outdoor hot compost pile. This is a composting toilet system you can experiment with for under $10. Commercial composting systems come in 2 types. The first is small, self-contained units where the composting unit and the toilet are 1 unit. These are best used in remote locations like seasonal cottages that see occasional use by just 1 or 2 people. The second kind of composting toilet is a centralized system where the toilets and composting unit are separate. 1 composting unit can sometimes handle several toilets. These systems are often used in national parks where access to water is limited or where soils are not compatible with conventional septic systems. But I've seen systems used in the center of large cities like Seattle in current generation of green buildings, and they're allowed by codes there. So in some local governments allow composting toilets to be used in place of conventional septic systems. In summer, one of the largest household water uses is watering gardens. The best technology for reducing water use in the garden is drip irrigation. Drip irrigation was developed for irrigating large areas of the desert in Israel. Drip saves 60% of the water used by conventional systems and keeps plants happier. Drip systems are inexpensive and can be equipped with timers that automate garden watering. Pinpointing the water right to plants ensures the water is not wasted or used to promote weed growth between plants or on paths. A sprinkler, on the other hand, indiscriminately spreads water everywhere. Drip works well with low pressure and gravity-fed systems because water drips slowly from the emitters. Drip keeps a good mix of air and water in the pores of the soil, where overhead watering tends to saturate the soil with water, and when the water drains away, leaves a deficit until the next watering cycle. Plants like drip irrigation. We added a drip irrigation system to our homeowner's mini greenhouse and hooked it up to a rain barrel. Let's take a look at how that process went. The first step was to install gutters on the shed to collect rainwater. Next, we installed a rain barrel to store the water. We attached the drip system to the hose connection at the base of the rain barrel. The garden is lower than the barrel, so we can use gravity instead of a pump to move the water to the garden. 1 or 2 feet from the bottom of the barrel to the garden provides enough pressure to operate the drip system. The first element in the system is a filter to keep debris from clogging the drippers. The next element is a timer. The timer automates the watering process. Next, we ran the pipe to the garden bed and across the short end of the garden to form a header. The pipe we've used so far is solid. It doesn't drip. It doesn't have any holes. Now here comes the magic part. We're going to connect 3 runs of drip tubing to the mainline pipe across the end of the bed. Drip systems don't require glue, complex fittings, or complicated tools. You simply poke a hole in the mainline tubing header and then insert the drip fitting into the hole. We repeated this process for all 3 lines. Next, we turned on the water and opened the timer. The water flowed into the system and out the ends of the drip tubes. Success! We let the water run out of the ends of the tubes for a few minutes to flush out the tubes. Next, we closed the ends of the tubes with a plug, and presto, water began to immediately drip from the emitters built into the tubing. The magic is that the drippers automatically drip the same amount of water regardless of the pressure or distance of the pipe. The final step is to set the timer for the frequency and length of time for water. For example, you could set the timer to water every day for 20 minutes. Here's a drip system on a small commercial greenhouse. Note that it has many of the same basic components as the simple home system that we just built. Now that we've reduced the amount of water we need, let's look at how we can supply this water. As we mentioned earlier, water is critical for life. It's good design to have multiple sources of water to supply this critical need. This is another example of a principle of ecological design. Each major function, in this case water supply, should be served by several elements, in this case sources of water. Here are the major sources of water for household use in order of sustainability. The first is rainwater harvesting. Harvesting rainwater connects you to the flow of abundance and scarcity in the natural environment around you. Rainwater can be stored in tanks, ponds, and in the landscape. You can set up an inexpensive rain barrel, as we just saw. With good design and a bit of luck, you can use gravity to distribute the water. Our homeowner used cheap cinder blocks to raise the rain barrel and situated her bed and greenhouse at an incline below to use gravity for water distribution. The next is groundwater. Groundwater is typically accessed with a well. Groundwater comes from a variety of sources that are replenished at different rates. If we mine water from the ground at rates faster than it is replenished, eventually the resource will be used up. This is happening with aquifers all over the world. We're using fossil water that in some cases was deposited thousands of years ago. And then finally, in terms of sustainability, there's water from municipal water supplies. I mentioned this last due to the energy, materials, and chemicals used in municipal water supplies. Let's discuss rainwater harvesting in a little more detail. Rainwater collection can eliminate the need for costly central water systems that mine water from deep in the ground. I've used rainwater to supply all my water needs for more than 20 years. And my family uses water in the normal, conventional ways that most families use water. Really, there's no difference. I'll use systems I've developed in Fairfield, Iowa to illustrate the principles and practice of rainwater harvesting, and I hope you'll get some ideas for your household. The first step is to look at the total amount of rainfall available and how it is distributed throughout the year. In southeast Iowa, we get about 35 inches of rain per year on average, fairly evenly distributed through the year, although we get more rain in the summer than in the winter. In contrast, a place like San Diego gets only 10 inches of rain a year, and it sometimes doesn't rain at all for 6 months. However, even San Diego could supply its water needs from rainwater. A house in San Diego with uneven distribution of rain would need more water storage than a house in southeast Iowa, which gets rain throughout the year. Here's how to calculate the water available from your roof. First, the pitch of your roof doesn't matter. It's the footprint that the roof makes on the ground that's used in calculations. It will be just a little bit bigger than the square footage of one floor of your home due to roof overhangs. Let's use a building that has a 40 by 40 footprint, including overhangs, and let's locate it in Fairfield, Iowa. So first step is to calculate the area of your roof. 40 feet wide by 40 feet long equals 1,600 square feet. Next, look up the annual rainfall. Fairfield, Iowa gets 36 inches of rain a year. There are many places on the internet that you can easily find this. Conceptually, think about the annual rainfall like a box of rain on top of your roof that is as tall as the annual rainfall. In this case, you will have a box of rain that is 40 feet wide, 40 feet long, and 3 feet tall. To get the annual cubic feet of rain, calculate the volume of the box. So that's just 40 feet wide by 40 feet long times 3 feet tall equals 4,400 cubic feet of water that would hit the surface of that roof in a year. Then convert the cubic feet into gallons. A cubic foot of water holds about 7.5 gallons. So 4,400 cubic feet times 7.5 gallons per cubic foot will yield 36,000 gallons a year. A Fairfield, Iowa home with a 40 by 40 footprint, 1,600 square feet, gets 36,000 gallons of water per year, almost 100 gallons per day. The total amount of rainfall delivered across the landscape is really astounding. The city of Fairfield, Iowa, where I live, gets 3 billion gallons of water that hits the surface of the city for a population of 10,000. That's about 218,000 gallons of water per person. And Jefferson County, the county that my community is located in, gets 264 trillion gallons of water for a population of 16,000. That's about 16 million gallons per person. Now, of course, we share water with lots of other life forms, but in most places, there is plenty of rainwater for human needs if we use it wisely. Now, it's not necessary to have high-quality potable water for most uses. You don't really need to use clean drinking water to flush your toilet, for example. Each person needs only a few gallons of potable, that is drinkable, water a day. Abundance Eco Village, the housing project in Fairfield, Iowa that I designed, uses rainwater to supply 100% of the needs of 15 homes, a vegetable farm, and a plant nursery. Its surface area is about 15 acres, which translates into 15 million gallons of water hitting the surface of the project each year. It supplies 2 grades of water to each house, one that is used for drinking and other high-grade uses, and a lower grade that serves toilets, washing machines, and outdoor faucets. The high-grade water comes from rooftop rain catchment and is stored in a 50,000-gallon tank. The lower grade water is collected off the land and is stored in ponds. We have on the order of 1 million gallons of water stored in the ponds for this project. Here are some things you can do to collect, store, purify, and use rainwater. First, let's discuss collecting rainwater. The higher your rainwater collection area, the better, because you can use gravity to distribute the water you collect rather than pumps. It's an example of the entropy principle. Once water has reached the lowest point on your property, it's lost some of its usefulness. You can no longer use gravity to move it. And gravity works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, never fails. I designed a gravity-based rainwater system for a toilet in Hawaii. I went to visit it 10 years later, turned the valve, and it still worked. It worked flawlessly for 10 years, requiring no energy or pump repairs because there was no pump. It may still be working. I haven't been back to check. Roof and garage areas work well and often already have gutters for rainwater collection. You can also collect rain off other hard surfaces like driveways and roads. Even gravel driveways are quite impervious to water, so factor them in too when looking for opportunities. It's easier to store rainwater collected off driveways, in ponds, or in rain gardens, and we'll talk more about that later. You can collect water in the landscape by building shallow ditches on contour. A contour line is a line that runs across the slope at a constant elevation. Ditches on contour are called swales and hold water in the landscape rather than letting it run off. Plant the downhill side of the swale and your plants will be automatically watered by the water that infiltrates through the swale. Ditches with a slight slope, called diversion drains, can lead water to storage areas, ponds and wetlands, for example. You may be able to use existing ditches to collect water. Abundance Eco Village uses diversion drains to collect rainwater falling in the landscape to a storage pond. Let's talk about storing rainwater. Rainwater can be stored in barrels. You can buy a rain barrel like this one for about $100. You can also make one from a surplus 55-gallon plastic barrel. I get mine from a Kelowna, Iowa cheese factory, and last time I checked, they were about $5. You can connect a hose to a barrel with a male garden hose to 3/4-inch male pipe thread adapter. Find a wood spade bit the same size or just a little smaller than the 3/4-inch male thread and use it to drill a hole near the bottom of the barrel. Then you can screw the 3/4-inch pipe thread end of the adapter into the hole in the barrel. The metal adapter will cut threads into the plastic barrel and apply silicone caulking liberally to the inside and outside. Each barrel provides 55 to 75 gallons of rainwater storage, and barrels can be connected to get larger amounts of storage. If your barrel is higher than your garden, you can use gravity to deliver the water. Even a few feet above your garden is enough to run most drip irrigation on gravity. Keep the barrel screened against mosquitoes. A 55-gallon rain barrel connected to roof gutters will quickly fill and overflow even on a small house. 55-gallon barrels are good for learning about rain catchment, but to reliably supply household and garden needs, you will need larger tanks. Reasonably priced polypropylene water storage containers up to 1,500 gallons are available at farm supply stores. Polypropylene is the same material many water bottles are made of. The cost is about 75 cents per gallon of storage. Concrete tanks are excellent for storing water and can be buried. Precast tanks of up to about 1,500 gallons are commonly used for septic tanks, and these tanks can be adapted for use as rainwater tanks. Expect to pay about $1 per gallon of storage. My home rainwater tank is 8,000 gallons and costs very little because I built it as part of my basement. Rainwater can also be stored in a pond. For around $500, you can have a pond dug that will store hundreds of thousands of gallons of water if you've got the space to dig it. In a few hours, you can dig a pond by hand that will store thousands of gallons of water, even in a backyard. To ensure an adequate water supply for a typical family of 4, I recommend at least 8,000 gallons for a whole house system in a rainfall area like Iowa, 36 inches distributed throughout the year. Now that we've collected and stored our rainwater, let's discuss how to treat it. For many uses like flushing toilets, washing clothes, and bathing, it may not be necessary to do any treatment. Rainwater used for drinking should be treated, but remember that drinking requires only a few gallons per day per person from a 50 to 100 gallon per person daily water budget. For drinking, I use a gravity system with ceramic filters that can treat thousands of gallons of water before needing to be replaced. You can also use solar distillation, pasteurization, sand filters, reverse osmosis, and UV light. Here's the system that purifies the rainwater in the Swartz-Guich Sustainable Living Center where I work. This building, as you're beginning to learn, has a metabolism. It collects and stores solar energy, and it collects and stores rainwater. And that way it's kind of like a tree. It's a living building. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how the building processes and manages rainwater as a water supply for the building. So we collect rainwater off the roof. We store it in a 10,000 gallon tank that's buried outside to keep it from freezing. And we bring it into this room where it goes through a series of filters to make it ready for use in the building. First filter we go through is a particulate filter, which takes out any particles in the water. Then it goes through a sand filter, a carbon filter, which takes out organic compounds like any pesticides that might be in the water, anything like that. And then it goes through an ultraviolet light, which eliminates any biological activity so that the water is safe to drink after that. As one further stage of processing at the water fountain, we actually put the water through a reverse osmosis unit. The rainwater system in our building has proven to be so popular that we've had to expand its capacity several times. People come from all over campus because it's the best quality water around. You'll find that rainwater is also great for showering and bathing. Unlike hard well water or municipal water in many parts of the country, rainwater is soft. Plants also like rainwater better than water company water, which has chlorine and other biocides added. Water often picks up impurities during use that need to be removed before using it again or discharging it in a yard, wetland, or stream. The second law of thermodynamics raises its head here. Once clean waters are mixed with pollutants, it generally takes energy and effort to clean them. In some ways, clean water is a very orderly form of water. and like more orderly forms of energy, it can do more work, you can do more work with it. As you pollute water, there is a kind of entropy of mixing. As water becomes polluted, as it moves through your life, it can do less and less until eventually it requires some form of energy and processing to make it able to do useful work again. So from a thermodynamics point of view, it's useful to match the quality of water with the use. Not all uses require potable water. Try to match the source of water with the use and use the water many times before purifying it for use again. Use biological purification systems rather than mechanical ones whenever possible. Sometimes called living machines, they integrate elements of biology and elements of technology. Biological water systems use solar energy and the intelligence of the biology to purify water. This illustrates yet another principle of sustainable design. Use biological systems rather than mechanical systems whenever possible. That's because biological systems, unlike mechanical ones, self-organize using solar energy to create order and structure. Abundance Eco-Village uses a constructed wetland living machine to purify sewage water. Sometimes the impurities in water are an advantage, and they can be used as food for plants. Gray water is water that doesn't have human waste in it, like the water from your sink, shower, or a washing machine. It can be used to irrigate your garden. The details of gray water systems are beyond the scope of this lecture, but Art Ludwig has a good series of books on gray water systems, including one called Creating an Oasis with Gray Water. Next, let's discuss dealing with stormwater. Urban landscapes are impervious, covered with hard surfaces like asphalt and buildings. Even small amounts of rain sheet off, pick up contaminants like oil, and have to be dealt with man-made storm sewer systems. In contrast, nature's way of dealing with stormwater runoff is with pervious surfaces that allow landscapes to infiltrate and purify water. Prairie, whose roots can be 30 feet deep, absorbs and stores heavy rain, then releases it slowly, minimizing or eliminating erosion. Millions of gallons of water per acre can be stored in the roots of prairie plants. In contrast, many human-built landscapes, like lawns, cannot absorb rainfall. Water gushes off, causing erosion, picking up contaminants, and becoming a waste product rather than the resource that rainwater really is. But if you design your yard to store and hold water in the ground, you'll provide an environmental benefit and at the same time minimize watering chores. One way to create a yard that infiltrates rainwater is to build a rain garden or swale. A rain garden is a garden in a depression with specially amended soil designed to store and infiltrate water. A swale is a ditch on contour that collects and holds rainwater until you can infiltrate it into the ground. Here's a rain garden that treats rainwater from a gas station in Fairfield, Iowa. Here are some design guidelines for rain gardens. Direct the water from hard surfaces to your driveway into a rain garden. A rule of thumb is to build a rain garden that is about 1/10 the area of the hard surface. For example, if your driveway is 500 square feet, then you need a 50 square foot rain garden. Place food-producing plants in and around the rain garden for even more benefit. Most rain gardens are longer than they are wide, perpendicular to the flow of water. Rain gardens have 3 planting zones. The middle, where water typically pools the longest, should have vegetation that tolerates wetter conditions. The intermediate zone, between the middle and outer edge, features vegetation that tolerates occasional standing water. And finally, the perimeter of the rain garden will have plants that prefer drier conditions. The basin of the garden should be level. If you're working on a slope, you can use the soil you dig out to create a berm on the lower side. This keeps the water in, preventing overflows and allowing water to store up before it draws down slowly. Water can enter your rain garden in a variety of ways. Rain chains, downspouts, grass swales, creek beds, and driveways. Consider an outlet if overflow may be an issue for your lawn or neighbor. Permeable paving is available for driveways and walkways, allowing water to infiltrate directly from these surfaces. I hope this lecture helps you begin to rethink water as it flows through your life. We've explored water from source to sink. You can start small by building the rain barrel or drip system I showed you how to make in this lecture. You can build a beautiful, functional rain garden. Even a dense city landscape can be made into a permeable, hydrologically functional landscape. By developing a relationship with water, you'll be ensuring supplies of clean water for future generations and for nature. Water is essential for life and essential for sustainability.